after this.
Now we have two panels to entertain you. First up, we're going to look at exactly the innovation and the collaboration efforts that I alluded to in my intro. And we're going to have a panel there featuring the networks, moderated by the lovely Zoe Samios from the Sunday Morning Herald. Please welcome them all on stage so they come down the catwalk and take their seats. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a round of applause. This is the longest walk on stage ever, Zoe. There you are. Well,
Morning, everyone.
you get that tight.
Is this working? Oh, yeah, we're working.
I'll put the timer on.
Well, I think it's probably a good time to sit down with all of you guys and talk about the local market, given all of the interesting insights we've had about overseas. Should we do proper introductions? I feel like we should. So sitting next to me on my left, I'm sure many of you know him, is Michael Stephenson, Nine's Chief Sales Officer. Next to him, we've got Beverley McGarvey, who is in charge of content for 10. Next to her, we've got Kurt Burnette, who looks after revenue for 7, and of course, Dave Roddick from Foxtel Media. I'm sure you're familiar with all of them, so it should be an engaging chat. I thought the best place to start was probably, I know we talked a little bit about the future of television overseas, but it'd be good to get an idea from you guys what you think the future of television actually is here, given that's the topic that we're going to be discussing today before we get into all of the innovations in the space. Steve-O, do you want to try and
Well, I just realised that the more on-demand content that you watch, the younger and classier you get. So there's a mental note for self. But in terms of the future, I think some of the presentations that you've seen this change in consumer behaviour, this combination of an SVOD world, a BVOD world, if you like, and obviously linear television viewing. So I think that is absolutely a part of all of our lives today. Of course, if you're an advertiser in the room, that doesn't mean so much to you, because as much as I love Stan, you can't advertise on it. So to answer to your question, I think future of television through my lens is a combination of linear television and BVOD working together. It's about on-demand, it's about addressability, and it's about automation. And they're the three things I think you're going to see a lot of today. A lot of work obviously is already being done around those three key themes. Some of you would have been in the VOZ presentation this morning, which we'll talk about in detail, I've no doubt, but on-demand, addressability, and automation.
Maybe from my point of view, which is probably a slightly different perspective to everyone else in the panel, from a content point of view, the future is really interesting because of that flexibility that all those different platforms offer. So we can commission in a way that we're not, which is kind of what we're here to talk about, we're not reliant solely on last night's ratings. And because people will choose to watch content however they want, that actually allows us flexibility in commissioning. And because we have all the other content coming in from overseas, it does make us focus more on local content, and how we exactly serve that is something that we're all kind of evolving, and that's kind of the bit that we're in at the minute, is just looking forward and going, what do we commission now to service everyone on all platforms, or to at least service everyone on the platform that they're watching. So I think that's kind of what the future looks like from a content point of view.
Great.
Yeah, and I think actually just building on that point, and I think it's a really important one, and it's been made a couple of times previously about the ever-changing face of the content that we produce here in Australia. And I think ultimately, Jim touched on it a bit at the start, but I think the future of television relies on content that is built around local production, news and sport. I mean, that's really what the future will be, certainly from a local production point of view. And I think it's a really important one, by the way, because that funds a whole lot of things in Australia, from jobs to investment in other areas. So I think that content structure is going to be an important part of the future. The other part is definitely, as Steve-O was saying, on... is that me?
It might be me. I might just...
I think it might have been me. Definitely automation systems is what's going to get us to a successful future. But I want to add to that attribution and return on investment is going to be a really important part. And I think in the future, if we just push forward another year, 18 months, it'll be very easy to buy television. You'll want to buy television because it's highly effective. You'll be able to do it in different ways, not just agent demo, and location, but through segment buying. And you know what? In 18 months' time, you'll know what success looks like when you do that. That's the future of television, and that's something that we're all working on together too. The other point on that is, the collaboration point to get to those areas is going to be really, really important. And even in the last guy mentioned it as well about how, collaboration and platforms and processes are such an important part. It is, and we're working towards that.
Would you add anything to that, Dave?
I think from a consumption point of view, it's clear that we are in the early stages of a delineation between what is going to remain a mainstay of linear, which is going to be news and sport, to Kurt's point, and the rump of that, which is going to move towards a more on-demand consumption experience. And if we're doing that, and if we have a very self-contained market here, we're already seeing that some of the global players are using Australia as a way of testing products and services. I think we're going to see more of a proliferation of platforms that launch into the market to test out whether they have viability. So I think we're going to see some app fatigue, and we're going to see some confusion in the market. We're already seeing people unsure where content resides, which platform it's on. So I think that we're going to see a delineation in consumption, and we're also going to see those on-demand portals need to find a point at which they can aggregate and they can be even more easily found, really to the point of Guy's presentation just now.
I want to get into VOZ in a second, but before we do, Bev, we're talking about BVOD and how content is available on lots of platforms. How has that changed the way that you commission content or look at a certain content? Do you go, oh, that would be great for online because maybe there's a younger audience? Do you commission things and say that would just be perfect for, I guess, linear television? How does that work now?
I think these days you cannot commission only for linear television. I think you have to commission things knowing that it has a life cycle beyond its initial broadcast. And I think we're getting to the point now that the initial broadcast will not necessarily be linear TV. So I think you have to commission broadly. There are certain types of shows and certain genres that obviously have a more robust afterlife. For 10 or 20 or 30 days, or in the case of drama, like 12, 24 months. So I think it dramatically changes the commissioning, but it's also a great opportunity because I think, and Australia was historically really renowned for this. We were really good at cancelling shows quickly, and sometimes that's not great, and you don't really give shows time to breathe and find if they really have an audience. Sometimes that early BVOD indicator tells you, well, there actually is a bit of a life for this show, and maybe 28 days later, people kind of find it, and it tells you that this is something that's really interesting, and it does change how you think about commissioning and how you think about success and what success looks like, and I think that's great for the audience because there will be more diversity in what is available for Australian audiences to watch in terms of local content.
Great. I thought thing that came to mind was Yummy Mummies, which I think was a 7 program that ended up on BVOD and was quite successful, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was, and that's it didn't perform how we wanted on broadcast, but we recommissioned Series 2, and it was basically a 7+ product only, and worked incredibly well. And I think that's actually a really important part as we talk about broadcast BVOD together, and then what content lies inside that, because there's also a bit of an education piece that we need to get to consumers as much as our customers. Because as an example, to the point around finding out what content works, so 7+ has 70% of the content there is not on broadcast, 70%. So there is content that lives there that is exclusive to that. The point that Christian was making around on linear, we sort of saw from the data that we were coming through that there was a real appetite for men inside, outside of 7 Mate on the digital platform. We commissioned a digital linear channel inside 7+. So we've got the Outdoor Channel, we've got Fuel TV, we've got Olympic Channel, we've got Pac-12. They are linear digital channels sitting in 7+ that don't sit in broadcast. So as we talk about the future of television, the driving of BVOD as a place for people to watch and for clients to invest in, it's not just what appears on broadcast that appears on digital either. That's actually an exciting proposition as well, and it's great for content makers as much as it is for the buyers and clients inside that.
Well, I feel like it's a good time to talk about VOZ, and I know that there was a session earlier this morning, but it's one thing to have these programs on BVOD and have an audience there, but when we're talking about measurement and what brands actually get out of it, that's where, my understanding is that's where VOZ comes in. How is that progressing, and what does sort of the outlook, what does this year look like in terms of the progress on that platform?
Yeah, I think I speak on behalf of all of us. There's never been television's never been bigger, it's never been better, it's never been more important across all of its forms, whether that's live streaming, of course, or on demand. It's never been more important to advertisers. I think a lot of the work that we've done through Think TV across the last couple of years has proven its, where it sits in the broader ecosystem, the power and effectiveness of advertising on these platforms, the size of the screen, viewability, and all of these things that we've proven. And I think, from where I sit, I certainly have never been more optimistic about being a part of what we do. That said, the world is changing, and the way in which people consume our content is fundamentally different today than it was 10 years ago, which was why VOZ is so important. The ability for us to be able to measure the way in which people consume our content inside and outside of the home on whichever device that they choose is critical if you're an advertiser to be able to deliver or to maximise reach, deliver campaigns, post-analyse in real time, and most importantly, deliver real business results. And you get the best business results when you advertise on television. So VOZ is almost here. Doug spoke about it this morning. I'm sure there'll be a lot of conversation over the course of the next day or so. It will give us the ability to measure the incremental reach that BVOD adds to television. Nobody else can do that. Ultimately, it'll allow you to buy audience segments as well as age and sex demographics in a combined linear and video on demand world. So the future, I think, based on what VOZ will deliver, is like ridiculously bright. At the same time, these things do take time, and I think complete credit to Doug and the OzTam guys for getting us to where we are today. There is still a long way to go. So what comes out in April, the data that agencies will start to see, which will be delivered daily, will be the very, very start of a journey. There's a lot of work to be done around the technology required to allow people to buy against that database, to be able to accept the data in the first place, and to take advantage of what I would call is today's television. But I think it is also important, really important, to recognise that Virtual Oz is not the only thing that we are doing as an industry, because that alone doesn't take us from where we are to where we'd like to be. It's literally just one part of a much bigger puzzle.
What else are you doing in that space? Maybe, Kurt, do you want to talk about some of the other work that you're doing?
Yeah, well, actually, I just want to pull on that point, because it's and we were just talking about it, Steve and I, before we got on, because the session yesterday, Pathfinders, and the one this morning, there was this idea of an oversell of what VOZ is and what it will bring.
Have a habit of doing that.
And look, and I think it's an interesting point, and it's something we talk about, and it's really a key point to note that, as Steve said, VOZ is one significant move forward in the evolution of television and the future of TV. It's not the only thing. It is a significant piece, as Brooksy said this morning. Project Dove in the UK, 14 years in the making, still not cracked it. After 2.5 years, I think we've made pretty good progress for where it's at. But I think something else that was raised this morning, John Broome from the AANA, and this is where we do need to get better at this, is to give a runway on. So VOZ is coming. It's going to do all the things that's been spoken about before. It is a game changer, but it's going to fit into the roadmap of the future of television, which is for the next 18 months pretty well mapped out from the VOZ rollout, as we work on attribution modelling, ROI, till we get to the system launch, June next year or around that time next year. This is a significant roadmap with many moving parts. And in terms of the oversell, so I've been thinking about it this way. We all here, trying to solve marketing problems. This product, if it's a product, it's not a funnel end-to-end marketing proposition. It's a flywheel. And that flywheel is about attract, engage, and delight. We've attracted, we're engaging, we need to delight. And the only way that wheel keeps moving is if customers come to that wheel and everybody feeds into that wheel to make it move faster. That's what we're in the process of. I think we've attracted a lot. We're in the mid-stage of engage. It's time to delight. And that's not far away.
At the same time, we shouldn't undersell it. Because
Why am I not surprised
where I
from
come
you?
in. Because it is amazing. And if you've seen the release that Doug sent out this morning, it does prove some pretty basic and things that we've always kind of known, but now we can prove it. That BVOD is adding somewhere between 3 and 9% of incremental reach to your television campaigns. If you're, based on whether you're targeting 25 to 54-year-olds or at the younger end, clearly it adds more incremental reach as they consume more in an on-demand sense. It also proves that on-demand viewing is 15 years younger in terms of median age versus live linear television. All of these things that we've known, but now we've proven. And that data that's come out today is the first stage of a rollout plan. So whilst we won't oversell and overpromise, because it is a journey, the results are pretty amazing. And we should, in Australia, be very, very proud of what we've achieved. And again, credit to Doug and his team, because no one in the world has done this. We are literally leading the world. And perhaps the relative simplicity of our market and the alignment that we all have as broadcasters and as media owners is unheard of in most other countries, so we can move forward at pace.
I think all that's true, and we are all very proud of what VOZ is and what it will achieve and what it's going to represent in terms of a game changer for the market. But I do think we have a watch out here. We do have to be careful that as we can measure the audience across content delivery across the platforms, and we can show incremental reach by on-demand platforms, that we don't equate the experience and we don't equate the delivery of that content to that audience on different channels as being just homogenous. Because if once you can measure that audience in from a single source, that doesn't necessarily mean that audience expects to be served the same experience on every platform, or that they will that the ads will be as effective or will work in the same way on every single one of those platforms. I think that we have to be very careful that content that I've selected from on whatever platform, whether it's a connected TV or it's a handheld device, that is a different viewing experience, has different expectations, and works differently as an ad environment than a broadcast television experience.
It's a really interesting point. I want to get into this idea of premium content just quickly, because it sort of ties in. But where are we at in terms of brands understanding the value of the content that all of you have on your platforms versus, advertising with your favourite people, the tech giants?
Well, I think the interesting thing about that, and I think it's particularly relevant in the BVOD space, is that, of course, traditional linear TV has particular audiences and they watch TV in a particular way. Obviously, we think our content is premium. The slide that really interested me, in the previous presentation, was about the cost of production. Like, we invest so much money into our shows, and things that you read about that people talk about cheap reality, as everybody in this room probably knows, there is no cheap reality on TV at the minute. The reality shows that we make and the storytelling and the staff that are required to make those shows are they're very well resourced, they're very expensive. The interesting thing for me in connection to this precise conversation is that when you're a BVOD viewer, you might have sat from our world, you might have watched The Project last night and you sat and watched Survivor because you kind of caught a bit and you went, whatever. But if you go searching for Survivor on 10play, you're a super engaged viewer. You have gone out of your way to find that. It's not like you scrolled through a feed and kind of clicked a button and half watched it for 5 minutes. You've gone looking for it. And I think to get audiences to go looking for things, you have to provide premium content. So obviously we're incredibly biased, but I feel like we're providing a premium service that's targeted particularly at Australians, which kind of sets us apart from what everyone else is doing.
I'd imagine brands would like that then, if they can see that. And it is a good point, if you are looking to watch something that you missed potentially the night before, or you are exploring those platforms, you are a different kind of viewer to the person that turned on their TV at 7:30 and that was what was available in front of you.
I think brands generally like safe environments, and that's what premium content does, of course. But at the same time, people are also deeply engaged in things that they're deeply passionate about. If I look at one of my 4 children and see how passionate he is about watching YouTube videos on someone playing Fortnite, I don't completely get it, but he does. And at that point in time, someone mentioned this earlier on today, like, he's deeply engaged. So I get the fact that people can be engaged in things that they're passionate about. I think the environments that we have are premium, they're brand safe, they're 100% viewable, they're all of those things that you guys should expect as a minimum expectation. And I'm not sure that everybody else can do that. So that's, without doubt, our competitive advantage.
And the premium content piece, the other really important part for this room, especially for the stuff that we produce, is it's premium content. It is brand safe, but it's integratable.
Yeah.
We can put brands inside that content, and that's something that others just can't do. A great piece of Fortnite content is awesome, and yeah, my son watches the same stuff, unfortunately. But he, that's not an integratable format, and that goes to a whole nother discussion about engagement and effectiveness and where that sits and what is truly that. So I don't think we should lose sight of that fact. Integration in content, in context, is incredibly powerful.
What we're going to see, I think, is this sort of dichotomy, if you like, because brands are going to want to deeply integrate their stories, their brand stories and their narratives into the content that we all create. And that's going to become more and more and more and more important. Whether that's drama, whether that's sport, whether that's reality, we create these formats across all platforms to allow someone to do that. And at the other end of the spectrum, we're going to see, I believe over time, this full automation of audiences delivered at a price. And whether that audience is against an age and sex demographic or against some sort of audience segment, whether that's using VOZ data ultimately with potential audience segments and different second-party data providers, or it's our own addressable ecosystem based on the signed-in users that we all have, you're going to see this two-speed economy. Deep, highly premium, integrated opportunities for brands to tell stories, and then audiences delivered at scale.
I do understand that we're at a television conference, but I do want to ask you guys, of course you have a vision for what you want brands to do with you, but what are the priorities that you're seeing for marketers? What do they actually want from you guys as versus what you want them to understand around brand safety and premium content and all that?
I think one of the things they are crying out for is, how do I take the lessons out of and use my assets that I'm creating for one platform, and how do I make that work across more than one platform? So they're living in a world where they're seeing their brands engage with people through every single medium available, and they're not limiting it to one or two channels. So how can I take content that I've created for social media, for example, and how can I make that work across broadcast, and how can I make that work across on-demand content? So one of the things that I think we'll see more and more of is developing formats that allow clients and brands to do that. So it's not just purely integration, and it's not your conventional 15s and 30s, but it's actually creating bespoke commercial segments that are for those brands and for those clients to utilize those assets more readily.
I think the problem is more simple though, because I know you guys will be having the same conversations that I am, and lots of you guys in the room, we're probably having them with you, whereby a marketer's feeling they're under so much pressure, and I can see the conversations playing out where they're almost relieved that they got away with only having their budget reduced by 5%, because that's a good outcome. Now, of course, that's a fine outcome if you've got to sell 5% less stuff. Of course, they don't. They've got to sell 5% more. So when a marketer's faced, or a brand is faced, or a company is faced with delivering business outcomes with less money than they had the year prior, you've got to do something differently. And I kind of believe that this sort of notion that everything that's old is new again. And the best way to deliver real business results, because we've proven it time and time again, is the combination of television and BVOD with other channels, obviously. But I do think that we need to start seeing this kind of movement, or this recalibration of investment back into channels that are proven to deliver business outcomes. Because if we don't do that, cars will sell 5% less, and fast-moving consumer goods will sell 5% less, and so on and so forth. And you can already see it playing out. So the notion of craziness, obviously, is continuing to do the same things and expecting a different result, and that simply won't happen. So whilst there is a whole range of things that we can do, and we can make it complicated, we've had a good run at doing that. But the simple things generally are the best, and I think this recalibration of investment to deliver better business results at the future of television is a really key thing.
But I think we also need to help. I was with a marketer for about 2 hours on Wednesday, actually, sort of not talking about this exact subject matter, but it was kind of like, I need, can you show me, what happens when, my campaign goes to air, it's in a different fashion, so they've got an agency to do that, and they're a very good agency, but it was just a different conversation, and it struck me then, again, not coming back to Vols solving the problems of the world, but just be able to show that number, I alluded to it, and they're leaning in going, okay, It's interesting. And again, that's not about having to be able to buy it and put it in a programmatic platform just yet. It's just show me some information so I can go back to my board to say, give me more investment in marketing, because here's an area that works. I think we understand what happens in Facebook, in YouTube, and other digital assets because I have real-time metrics or whatever they talk about there. But from a TV perspective, we need to get better at giving that information back. VOZ, certainly does that. And I think the other thing that they're asking for is, I know that show. It's a great show. I like my brand inside that show because it has great context in there, and you'll see something a bit later on which Nat's talking through on our solution to that about getting content in context, or ads in context. It's another big piece. And the other thing is, it comes back to the content thing, which is such an amazing driver of everything that we do, is this conversation that I was having. I know a lot of other people are having this. Content and distribution. Just think about that for a second. Content that we create, amazing content, and distribution. That distribution currently sits now, thankfully, on many, 42 different device platforms, whatever that number is, iOS and Android, all of that. Our content living inside stores, our content living inside cars, our content living inside all notion of other services. That's the future of television. Those are the conversations that we're having now. And I find that really interesting. But we got to solve some of the basics first. But there's real live conversations that are going way beyond, just what does a spot cost and how do I buy it? And that's exciting.
I'm wary of time, but you guys have sort of touched on something that I feel like we need to address, which is if I have to come up with a synonym for weak ad market conditions one more time in the next few weeks, I don't know what I'm going to do. But we've obviously had a really, really tough year across the whole market with advertising spend. I've spent weeks looking at financial results, and that is the rhetoric from everyone. What does the actual outlook look like? Because we can talk about everything you guys are doing in the space, which is great, but at the end of the day, you need the actual money and people to actually invest with you guys. So what does that actually look like?
Yeah, I think if you look at it myopically through the lens of television, there is obviously cyclical and structural change. The structural component, of course, is the different viewing behaviours and consumption behaviours that we see today, which we've spoken about in terms of live streaming and on demand. We're obviously going through an economic cycle as well. There are a whole range of external factors that are out of our control, and hopefully some of them have lower impacts than others, and there will be a cycle and the market will return. I suppose it's what we all do collectively within that cycle to ensure that the brands that you guys are the custodians of continue to grow. And that's kind of where I spend most of my time thinking. There's 1,000 people in my organisation can come up with reasons why the ad market is soft. That's not an excuse, it just is a thing. What we can do is work with you guys collectively as an industry to help grow the brands that you guys represent, to do things differently, to be more innovative, to make buying television easier. We are as an industry creating a platform to enable the agencies to take advantage of everything that is VOZ, but also to drive efficiency in the process of the trading of television inventory. Buying and optimising and cancelling and rebooking and chasing make goods for a $10 spot on Gem in Adelaide and off-peak is not much fun for anyone. We should change those types of things. And the more we do things like that, I think, and the more we make television easy to buy, the more advertisers feel like it's a more appropriate place to advertise. It makes their life easier, and I think that brings money back into our world.
Would anyone else like to add to that?
Well, I'm probably on a slightly different side of it. Obviously, there's cyclical and structural challenges. For us, obviously we need to do everything we can to kind of work with the brands that support us, but we also have to work to maintain our own brand, because if our brands aren't strong, then it kind of doesn't work for anyone. So in times like this, I think, the thing for us is to invest wisely and utilise our content as well as we can. And, the BVOD and VOZ situation actually helps that, because you get more value out of your content, and that helps us be strong and it helps our brands to stay strong. So I think think we kind of have to, and also as well as service and marketers, we are also marketers. We spent money promoting ourselves. So I think that's really interesting sitting on my side of it, because obviously if there's a challenge in sales, the next challenge is, okay, do you want to spend less money on content? Of course the answer is no, I'd not like to do that, thank you. So sometimes that's not an acceptable answer. So it's just about ensuring that we stay strong through this period, so that when the cycle does come back, that we have a really strong portfolio to offer people.
And you mentioned that point on the value, and I mentioned this last night too. I fundamentally believe that we were talking about back in, Victor was saying about 10 years ago when TV was doing its thing and it was doing, 1.82 million in overnights, and that's all there was then. There was no anything else. We didn't do enough thinking about what the real value of that audience was in TV. If we had have applied the same thinking, learnings, debate, discussion we're having now then, I wonder if we'd be in a different place now, but we're not. So now, how do we get that value that you talk about? I think there's an opportunity to show the real value of what our content is doing in audience base and breaking it down and doing all the things that VOZ will do. So there's a real value opportunity to give back to show brands. So when in that meeting, coming back to the reasoning about the market, the systems we're doing, making it easier to buy, but it comes down to when the marketer is creating that plan, where am I going to move? Can I get an investment to ensure that marketing is seen as an investment, not a cost, because it's not. It is an investment in business. But then when I am doing that plan, I'm going to just invest in the thing that I've seen arise stronger than it's ever been before. The new TV. It's not the old TV anymore. It's the new TV. I'm going to move a little more money this way. And I hope, and we hope, and all the work that we're doing is going to change that. That behaviour right there, that changes the market. And it's been a pretty horrible season of reporting. Some more than others, but no company is out of this, and it's affecting everybody, and it's something we do want to solve together. But if we get that conversation, I think it can certainly help going forward. We have to get it right.
Do you want to? We're pressed for time, but did you want to add anything?
Look, I'd echo that point about collaboration and working together. And I think for us, it goes beyond just scale. And VOZ do a fantastic job in getting the point out there around audience delivery across platform. But it has to go beyond that. And we as media owners have to work with clients and advertisers and agencies to show that it's not just about scale of delivery, but it's about power of delivery as well. And the audience isn't just reached, but it's reached effectively. So that sort of collaborative process to help those clients who are under the pump and do have pressures on their own budgets, show and demonstrate to their procurement people and their CFOs that they are spending that money with a genuine effect, is incumbent not just on them, but on us.
That's probably a great place to wrap up. If you join me in thanking our panel.